And we are beginning our virtual basketball media day. Good morning, everyone. Joining us first is our commissioner, Kallander. He is in his 25th year leading the Big South Conference, and he will begin with an update on the 2020-21 season. So Kyle, welcome. He is live from the Big South Network studio. Excited to have him this morning. Kyle, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. Our 25th and most unusual year, certainly, at the Big South Conference, but we're all experiencing that. Thank you all for joining us virtually this morning. A little bit ironic that November 10th was when we thought we'd be bouncing the ball and tipping it off, and here it is, just our media day. So, but I suppose with everything that's been going on, we're grateful that we've got a season coming up here in a couple of weeks, and we're very excited about that. You know, the Big South is ready to go. Our institutions have been working hard on safety protocols. Our coaches have been managing very challenging circumstances on campus, and our student athletes have been dedicated, diligent, and really courageous in handling the current environment and circumstances on campus. I'm so proud of all the work that everybody on campus, our student athletes, and everybody as a team working together to really make this season happen. They've really worked hard, and we're excited to get it going. It's been a long road getting here. There's no doubt about it. We probably went through double-digit models and trying to figure out our schedule for this year. You know, we finally landed on the back-to-back version of the schedule, which we think is the right place to be. It's the safest place to be. And I think it'll serve our student athletes and our institutions well. Certainly, it will present its own challenges, but as we work through what we were trying to do for this season, you know, our coaches were very clear that safety was number one priority. No doubt about that. Number two was how can we try to get a representative schedule in? And all the competitive issues and the competitive factors of the schedule were way down the priority list. So we feel like we landed in the right place as far as the schedule goes. Additionally, we've had great cooperation from our medical professionals. We've worked well with our team physicians and our head athletics trainers. They've been really important and really critical in developing our protocols moving forward. In fact, we're on, I think, version 11 of our conference COVID guidelines. So it's something we've been working on for some time. We of course, were working on it for the fall, which for the most part ended up not happening. And as you all know, things are changing pretty rapidly, so we've been trying to keep up to speed and up to date on our protocols moving forward. I also want to give a shout out to our newest corporate partner, Mako Medical. They've really been great to work with and has really helped us develop our testing protocols, and we're very involved with us, working with them hand to hand on testing for our student athletes and tier 1 individuals, and also our game officials moving forward for this year. So they've really been a great partner of ours and really timely to bring them in for this year. We recognize there are going to be disruptions in the schedule. We've seen that in the fall sports. We know that's going to happen in basketball, but you know, the steps we've taken in terms of adding additional conference games, providing some flexibility within the schedule to provide makeups to games that are not played, we think we're going to end up in a good place. At the end of the year, we're going to be culminating in the Hercules Tires basketball championships again. We're really looking forward to that. We will be going back on campus for the championships this year, and we're currently planning our established format for the number 1 seed hosting the quarters and semis on both the men's and women's side, and then the highest remaining seed hosting the championship game. However, we're going to continue to evaluate the environment that's out there. We may decide as we move forward that we want to adjust that format in some way. So stay tuned on that. We're not sure exactly what that's going to look like. If things move forward as we hope they will, you know, we'll have the same format. If not, we may make some adjustments to that. So we just want to make sure that whatever we do, that the environment's going to be as safe as possible for all involved. Now, having said all that, we're terribly excited about the basketball season. We can't wait to tip it off, and not just because we're going to be playing games again, but you know, I think it's going to really be an intriguing season. A tremendous talent returning on all of our teams. It's going to be fun to watch. You know, we got fairly new coaches that are in their second or third years in their programs this year. So it's really going to be interesting to follow along and see how their programs are developing. And as you see in the preseason standings, you know, there's some expectations for some of those fairly new coaches in their programs. So that's going to be fun to watch. And with this unusual year, it's really going to be critical to be able to focus. It's going to be critical in order to keep your momentum, to limit the distractions. Who's going to handle that the best? It's really going to be interesting to see how that moves forward. But we're confident that it's going to be a very compelling, exciting, and competitive season in Big South basketball again this year. Now, it certainly would be remiss if I didn't step off the court and recognize the great accomplishments of our student athletes in the classroom. Our men's basketball graduation success rate is an incredible 96% this year. That's tied for 5th of all Division I conferences. So proud of their accomplishments. And not to be outdone, though, on the women's side, their federal graduation rate is tied for 9th of all Division I conferences. So just some really incredible performances in the classroom. But we also have student athletes that are involved nationally in leadership positions in basketball. Campbell's Lauren McNamara Clement serves on the NCAA Women's Basketball Student Athlete Engagement Group. And High Point's John Michael Wright is on the 9-member NABC Player Development Coalition. So really, really exciting to see them involved in national issues in basketball. Our student athletes continue to impress us and continue to inspire us every single day. So this is an unprecedented time, but I'm confident that we'll have a compelling basketball season with great performances and memory-making accomplishments by our outstanding student athletes. And come March, the Big South Conference will be crowning champions once again. So thanks again, everybody, for joining, and I'm more than happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Kyle. At this time, we'll take questions for the commissioner. Please enter your name in the chat box, and we'll take your questions as they come in. We have about 25 minutes with the commissioner. And Kyle, while we're waiting for a question or two, if you want to kind of touch on maybe what some of the schedule options that the conference leadership decided on and reviewed before coming to the current format.
Yeah, I think we started out, as many conferences did, looking at were there bubble options that might make the most sense for us. We looked at even bringing everybody in December and trying to knock out half of our conference schedule at a location. And in fact, we put an RFP together and actually sent that out. Ultimately, we felt like, we couldn't do an NBA bubble. That's just not feasible. So it wasn't going to be quite as secure as we thought. And there was a certain level of expense involved with that. And ultimately, we didn't think that was really worth it. Then we kind of moved to different pods. So if we had a series of pods throughout the season where you bring in 3, 4, 5 institutions to one location over a weekend and knock out 3 or 4 games, do that several times, maybe space out the time in between those pods, would that be a way to think about it? So we're kind of going down that path for a little while. And then we kind of bounced back and forth. Maybe it was just better just to have the single games, that you're limiting your exposure, by how many teams you have in one place. And we finally, of course, landed on the back-to-back, which did become popular in college basketball this year. And so we've been, focused on that for some time now. And we do feel that by doing that, you are limiting exposure. You're playing the same team 2 consecutive days. That makes some sense. The NCAA's even recognized you could have some different testing protocols if you're doing that. So that was the right place for us to be. I mentioned the competitive issues. That's not the favorite model of the coaches. Now, you don't have home and homes of everybody. You got to go play on somebody else's court two times in a row. Likewise, you got somebody else coming to your court. But again, the competitive aspects of it was certainly a less priority than making sure we were safe. So it's a right place to be. We do have a couple of games before Christmas, which is good. We want to try to knock out games if we can, get as many games in as we can, and feel like it'll be the right place.
All right, thanks, Kyle. We do have several questions for you. First is from Dave Friedman of the Winthrop Sports Network. Go ahead, Dave.
Kyle, thanks for taking the time. You mentioned that because of the pandemic and because of the climate that we're in, you have to be somewhat flexible. But when do you have to have the format for the tournament fully decided and set in stone? Is that something that can be changed once conference games begin, or when conference games start at the beginning of December, do you have to know what you're doing?
I think we can even get to February before we decide that. I think I'll correct myself a little bit in that I don't see us moving off of campus. So, I think we'll be on campus if we make any adjustments. So from that standpoint, I don't think there will be a lot of concern from maybe a competitive aspect. But I could see us spreading the games out, going to higher seeds all the way through rather than having multiple teams in one location. We've reserved that last week of the season for makeup games. Now, it's possible that if we don't have a lot of games to plug in there, we could spread out the tournament over 2 weeks at the end of the season if we feel like that would be a safer option for us. So those are the kind of options we're looking at. We're not looking at neutral sites. We're not looking at anything like that, I don't think. But and so if we're looking at something like that, and we really won't know what that last week of the season looks like early on, we may be able to wait until February before we make those decisions.
You also mentioned that you looked at a lot of different scheduling formats, a lot of different options before landing where you decided on. Inevitably, someone is going to object that they got a more difficult or someone else got an easier schedule. That's just the nature of the beast. But how did the schedule arrive at Campbell plays at High Point, whereas Hampton plays? How did you determine who plays who, where, and when?
Yeah, Dave, and we did have some questions when we came out with the schedule about that. I mean, there are some competitive instincts out there, and so there was some feedback we got in that regard. But it was put together completely randomly. Really had nothing to do with who played where, when. It's just what fell in place. And so we assured the coaches there wasn't any effort to do anything other than just try to get the games played and see how it just all fell out. So it ended up being just a random schedule. And the coaches in the end certainly understood what we were trying to do there. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Next question, Kyle, is from Alex from the Rock Hill Herald.
Hey, Commissioner, how you doing?
Great, Alex.
I was hoping you could elaborate on the testing plan and specifically how testing changes with this new schedule. I mentioned that you mentioned that just in your last answer. So yeah, if you could just elaborate on the testing and how that kind of wiggles out with this new back-to-back schedule.
Yeah, so generally with high-risk transmission indoor sports, the NCAA stipulates 3 times a week testing. There is a caveat, however, that if you're playing just one opponent during the course of a week, you can reduce the number of tests to 1 PCR test or 2 antigen tests day of the games. So there's an opportunity there if you're only playing one opponent during that week, even if it's back-to-back games, that you can reduce the overall number of tests that you're having to conduct and reduce your expense likewise.
Okay, so to synthesize, yes, safety was at the forefront of your decision to go to this back-to-back schedule, but safety really means being able to kind of streamline testing.
Well, safety means obviously going along with the protocols that are established by the NCAA and their medical advisory group, and they take a lot of their lead, of course, from the CDC. And by the way, the CDC doesn't have a lot of protocols in place for athletics, and so that's why the NCAA has been so involved in it. But if people a lot smarter than me can come in and say this is what the protocol you need to be safe, then of course that's what we're gonna take heed and we're gonna follow. So, and if there's a way to do that where we can also save some money on the other side, we're interested in doing that if we can. But clearly, we are absolutely going to follow the guidelines and protocols set up, by the NCAA and their medical advisory people.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
All right, Kyle, next question is from Marty Gordon of the Radford News Messenger. Go ahead, Marty.
Kyle, first of all, thank you for taking this time during this crazy time, that athletics and everybody else is dealing with. Can you elaborate a little bit on how much of a strain this COVID-19 has been for your office and maybe you personally, and And how do you think the 7-player and 6-player requirement will affect the teams in order to have that many players available during this COVID thing?
Yeah, great question. It's been tough. It really has been, and I know our staff has been doing an outstanding job working through it. I mean, it's really been hard on them with all the uncertainty, not knowing where things were going. We're still working through all the financial impacts of the pandemic through the entire year. So it's really been a challenge. Of course, not being in the office for a period of time and just having your world turned upside down. You're so used to a certain routine and certain topics and certain responsibilities and solutions moving forward, and it's just not there anymore. You're not working on sports anymore. You're working on other things. So we've all gotten to know too much about COVID and too much about testing than we ever thought we would. So it's really been a challenge. And personally, it's I confess I didn't handle it very well. It's been really a challenge because I'm a person that likes to try to find solutions. I'm a person that likes to try to solve problems, and it's hard to solve a problem when you don't know what it is. It's hard to answer the question. You don't know what the question is. So really difficult, I think, trying to push forward through it. But again, really proud of what our staff is, and really proud of what our schools have done, because they've been hit a lot harder than the conference office has, and so for them to really push forward, and for our presidents to keep their doors open for the most part and keep students on campus and keep moving forward, and then for our athletic programs to try to find solutions to all these challenging problems. I have a lot of admiration and respect for what they've gone through and how they've been able to get to this point. So another reason why we're really excited to be able to focus on sports and focus on basketball moving forward. The 7 and 6, it's really going to be interesting, because part of the problem we've got, and you're reading all about it every day, is with the contact tracing and how many people get swept up, even if you just have one positive test. Can you still field the team if you have a positive? And that's yet to be seen. But I think it's a good place for us to be. With Charleston Southern last year on the men's side, they were playing the last month or so with 6 warm bodies, and so it's not unusual that you've got that low number. Obviously, we hope that's a very unique and rare occurrence. But at the same time, I said the second priority was try to get games in, and so if you feel like you can safely do that with the requisite number of student athletes you have available, then we want to try to move forward.
Anything else, Marty?
No, thank you, Kyle, and good luck this season.
Thank you.
All right, Kyle, next question for you is from John Tito. John, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, Mr. Commissioner, I just wanted to know, budget-wise, how is the Big South doing, either in general or in basketball specifically, and how important is it to you guys to have a conference tournament and/or NCAA tournament in the spring?
Well, conference-wise, we're actually doing okay, and the NCAA actually, when they made their decisions on their revenue distribution, they did. There's a fund called the Equal Conference Fund, and they did fund that 100%. So that really helped conferences, especially mid-major conferences, to continue to fund their operations, and really to help our institutions. We actually, when the pandemic first came down, we actually took action immediately, as everybody did, to try to see where we could save money and where we could try to really assist. And so we reduced this year's budget dramatically. But we did have a surplus at the end of last year. And so just we kind of wanted to get through our audit process. We actually sent just last week nearly $1 million back to our schools, because we wanted to help to support them. And we had some surplus here in the conference to be able to do that. And by, again, saving money, cutting back, and also protecting the revenue that we did have come in last year. So this year, certainly, we're looking at a deficit like everybody is, and we're trying to figure out how to manage that the best we can. If the NCAA does not play basketball, if we don't have March Madness this year, it's going to be a game changer for everybody. There's just no doubt about it. That's why you see the priorities putting in place to make sure that it happens, and I'm confident it will happen. But if that revenue fell off for a second year in a row, we'd be looking at a completely different model, completely different look to college athletics moving forward, certainly at our level. those that don't have as much of the CFP football money certainly are reliant on those basketball funds. So it would be devastating, I think, for college athletics as we know it. So we're doing everything we can, but basketball is a priority for us to make it happen. You're seeing that basketball is a priority for the NCAA, and we know that they're going to have a tournament, and we don't know yet what it's going to look like. We don't know how many fans are going to be there. We don't know how many fans are going to be at our games yet. I know that a lot of them are saying right now they're not going to have fans until after the first of the year, if then. There may be some that have a low number, but we're kind of going to tiptoe into this as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Next question, Kyle, is from Jacob Conley from the Forest City Digital Courier, and you touched a little bit about his attendance question, but Jacob, go ahead, please.
Mr. Commissioner, you've touched on attendance a little bit, but does the Big South have guidelines for that, or is it left up to the schools and the state guidelines?
Yeah, because we're over 3 states in our basketball programs, we're just leaving it up to the institutions on how they're handling their attendance and their restrictions. We will have restrictions in terms of access, certainly to certain parts of the arenas for spectators. Obviously, we don't want a lot of mixing, but we are allowing institutions to make their own decisions on attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Kyle, next question is from Brian Hall. Hey, Brian.
Hey, guys. Actually, that was going to be my question. And I guess just to delve into that a little bit more, when you think about, you said that you've talked about the competitive standpoint, and obviously it's there's pros and cons with any kind of schedule that you're coming up with. But when you talk about fan attendance, there's state guidelines, and then it comes down to institutional. Kyle, have you thought about just a conference-wide guidelines to make it fair, so that if there's no fans for one school, it's no fans for all schools? Or does it end up being a competitive advantage in the end if somebody's in South Carolina with Winthrop and Upstate and Charleston, and they get to have fans, while in North Carolina we have none all year?
Yeah, really from the very beginning of this, we talked about institutional autonomy in a lot of different places, whether it was competitive, whether it was determining our AQs, how many schools were in, how many were out, and that carried over, I think, to our attendance discussions. And so we really haven't had a lot of discussions about this. There hasn't been a lot of concern about whether one institution could have fans and another couldn't. So I don't sense, that there's going to be a lot of concern about that from a competitive aspect to it. Certainly, there probably won't be even. The states won't be in the same place. But at the same time, I think our schools are being very responsible about how they're approaching this. So, I'd be surprised to see a lot of opening wide up, to fans to come in. So I don't necessarily anticipate a lot of competitive advantage necessarily, at least not in the near term. Once we get into January, February, obviously we'd have to see how that all pans out. But not a lot of concern right now inside of our conference about whatever advantage you might have from an attendance standpoint.
Okay, and one more question too about the tournament. I mean, the last couple of years it's been pack up and leave, and go have the championship game at a different site. Any thought this year that whoever the highest seed is, we're stuck, we're going to play here, whether or not you're in the championship game or not, because we just can't, again, risk the travel and all of that entails with COVID?
Yeah, Brian, great question. We have talked about that. And so that's another possibility of a format we might move to if we decide we don't want to travel, we just want to stay in one place. Is that better to have everybody in one place and not move around versus maybe spreading it out so you're playing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday at various locations? So those are the kinds of things we're going to have to evaluate and weigh as we move forward. Obviously, a lot more travel in the other direction, in the other format, but you've only got 2 teams in one place at any one time. So we'll have to kind of see how things go moving forward.
Okay, thanks. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. We're taking questions for Big South Commissioner Kyle Kallander. We have about 6 minutes left with his session. Just to enter yourself in the queue, just type in you'd like to ask a question, and we will get to you. And Alex from Rock Hill has another one for you. Kyle?
Hey again. Kind of off pace from COVID and budgets and stuff. Anecdotally, what was it like having the Big South champions last year, Winthrop, not being able to go into the NCAA tournament? What was the sense that you got, Kyle? What was the sense that the Big South kind of felt, if you feel comfortable speaking on behalf of all the teams?
Well, that was the worst part, is just seeing the hard work and the dedication of our student athletes and then not being able to take advantage of that. So for Winthrop to go there to win, that's the goal for that team, those student athletes, the coaches, to be in that position where you're at the highest of the high, winning the conference tournament, looking for the NCAA, and 3 days later, it's pulled out from under you. So it was devastating in a lot of ways. And, to the very end, we were hopeful that we could salvage something in some way, but it was clear that things were going the other direction. So that's I think our hearts broke for all our student athletes. I think that was pretty universal within the Big South Conference. We pulled our women's basketball teams off the court, when the decision was made, and they still had that to look forward to. So there's a lot of opportunities that could not be taken advantage of, not to mention, then what happened with spring sports and fall. And so it's, I can't imagine being in that position as a student athlete where you've been playing this sport and focusing on this all your life, and you get an opportunity to play Division I, and you're moving forward, and then all of a sudden it's not there. I mean, it's got to be really hard for them to deal with. And that's why I'm so proud of what they've done. And we've worked with our student athlete advisory committee on a regular basis through this entire pandemic, and they've been great. Their attitude's been great. They've been very positive, excited to move forward. And so we really want to make this happen for them. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Marty Gordon, you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Hey, Commissioner, I know it's one of the things that during all this that you've had to think of, but has there been any cutbacks or layoffs at the Big South? And I mean, what across the board have you heard from your member schools?
Yeah, and it varies school to school. Some have had to take action, some have not. We have not laid anybody off. We had one interim position we didn't fill at this point, but as I mentioned, we're still working through the financial aspects and implications on this. We're just, we just got into the last week or so, what the finances look like to test all of our basketball officials for this year. So it's not an inexpensive proposition. So you're trying to invest in areas you really need to invest in to be safe. At the same time, you're facing drop in revenue from whether it's events or media rights or sponsorships or other things. And so you're trying to balance that a little bit. But we've been trying to do the best we can to be responsible as we can. And so we'll just kind of have to see moving forward. But it's really important to protect your people. We've been trying to do that as best we can.
Thanks, Marty. And Kyle, as we wrap up with you, let's look ahead to the future, the 21-22 with the addition of North Carolina A&T, as well as going to Charlotte for the championship. You can just kind of touch on what A&T will look like with 12 teams, what that means for both basketballs as well as the conference tournament next year.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We're really excited for NCAA coming in. They've been great partners already. I mean, they're participating in all of our meetings, had great conversations with them, really great leadership, great people. So we think it's going to be a wonderful partnership with them. And so really looking forward to that. So the basketball seasons next year, as A&T comes in on the men's side, we are going to have divisions, North and South. And they are going to play 16 conference games. On the women's side, however, they decided not to go to divisions. Coaches were not interested in that. They wanted to keep it straight 12, and they'll have an 18-game conference schedule. So a little bit different between men and women, but I really looking forward to, again, what A&T brings to the table and the rivalries that will develop out of that. And then you mentioned the 22 basketball tournament, which unfortunately we had to delay our Charlotte opportunity. But Charlotte's been a great partner. And they certainly understood what we needed to do for this year. But we're already beginning to think about, okay, what do we need to do to get 22 up and running and make it happen? We're really excited about bringing the Hercules Tires basketball championships to Charlotte in 22.
Well, Kyle, that is the time we have for you. We really appreciate you taking the time and meeting with our great media members to talk about the 2021 season. Thanks again. And obviously, anytime you all would like to talk to the commissioner, just let us know and we'll get you all arranged. Kyle, thanks again.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone, for joining. Looking forward to the basketball season, and I really hope to see you in person sometime soon.